Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Wednesday, the 11th of March. And joining me on this edition are banana ruler of the world, Steve Withers.
Fly a plane, yes. Land a plane, no.
And audio reviewer, Ed Selley.
X never ever marks the spot.
So, Mr. Harrison Ford cheats death by landing his aeroplane in an emergency. He's a little bit battered and bruised, but that seems to be about the extent of the injuries. There was, for a small time, guys, a window of, oh no, not another one of our childhood heroes about to go, but it looks like he's turned it around.
Yeah, it's a bit of a relief, that, because it could have really buggered up the Star Wars films if he'd gone and killed himself in a plane crash.
No, I still reckon they're going to get a shot of all of the original cast members in the first film.
Do you?
Yeah.
Well, like a mass killing at the end, like at the end of the
I told you they're going to be slaughtered in their Jedi old people's home or whatever it is they're actually in, and then they can crack on with people that don't make noises when they move. Not least because there are going to be expensive things people to have kicking around. I mean, okay, I know that Mark Hamill is mainly sort of voiceover stuff, and I don't know how well that pays. And Carrie Fisher
just doing,
is doing Family Guy, but nonetheless, I just think that they're there to do a solemn handover ish, and then they'll crack on. You heard it here first.
So we're calling it Family Guy now, are we?
Well, whatever.
Do you think at that moment where the engine was starting to cut out, and it's spluttering, and he's thinking, oh shit, and then in the back of his head, because it's Harrison Ford, in the back of his head, you got the...
I don't know. Have closer scrapes than this. Don't worry about it.
He's supposed to be a pretty well-respected pilot. He's not.
Yes.
He's no amateur at this. As I understand it, he whenever they have to do search and rescue for people that wander off into the middle of bloody nowhere, in the sort of gap between Los Angeles and Las Vegas, he normally volunteers, as I understand it, and he's regarded as being a pretty good stick man. So I'm delighted that he's the old adage, any landing you walk away from,
is a good one. Yeah,
done that.
Although he was stretchered off, and I don't know if you saw the tweets, but the tweets were really funny where he was in carbonite.
I saw. Yeah, there were some really clever ones on B3TA, and the one where they're stretching off in carbonite was brilliant.
Yeah, that was really funny, and that was only like an hour after it happened.
Yeah, they did one where he's piloting. He's in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon with Chewie, and then in the back of the Millennium Falcon, it's the scene from Airplane when the plane's doing all the stuff. It's some really good stuff.
He obviously knows Southern California really well because he thinks, shit, I'm going to crash my plane. Where should I go? Golf course. Bound to be loads of surgeons and doctors there to help me out.
It is true.
And it was an old World War II plane as well, so kudos to the guy. I mean, it wasn't a modern light aircraft, it was an actual historic World War II two-seater trainer, wasn't it? So.
Yeah.
He's proving indestructible after breaking his leg on the set of Star Wars last year and now surviving his crash. What next for Harrison Ford? Maybe he'll be able to recover his career.
Oh. He's got a long way left to fall.
Oh, then when did he last do when was the last time Harrison Ford made something that you thought, I really want to see that?
I don't know. There are films that I have subsequently seen him in. I was expecting very little, and I thought he was quite good.
He popped up in Anchorman 2 recently, a year or two ago, which was okay. I mean, he did Raiders, Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull, which is bloody awful. He's doing Blade Runner 2 now, and that's scraping. I mean, that's a film he hated. Hated filming, didn't want to talk about it for years. Now he's doing the sequel, which sounds like a bit of barrel scraping to me.
Admittedly, it is 5 years old, so it's not exactly recent. But I thought his turn as that old news anchor bloke, prior to Anchorman 2, ironically, in Morning Glory, a tremendously unsuitably named film for the English-speaking world. But I actually thought he was quite good in that. I'll put my cards on the table.
Fair to say, he's not the star he once was.
Well, yeah, but ultimately, how old is he now?
Christ, must be
72.
So how many? I mean, if we basically, you're talking Clint Eastwood stopped at pretty much the right time, although not actually before. I mean, he picked up at the end, but he did some intermittently crap stuff in the middle.
I just think everybody's career is the same. You're going to have your high points and you're going to have your checks that pay the bills.
Yes.
And every actor, in fact, every career will be like that. No matter what you do, you're going to have your years where you're just coining it in and you're the best thing since sliced bread, and then the rest of the time it's just going to be a wage.
And if I had to suddenly, I don't know, pay for the repairs of a 60-year-old training aircraft, I'd sign up for Blade Runner 2.
Yeah, I mean, look at the guy. What a guy. I mean, Harrison Ford, just cheats death, just like that.
He was knocking on a bit when he made Star Wars, wasn't he? Really, he was no spring chicken even then.
What, the original one?
Doing the maths in my head quickly. He was like
he's in his 30s.
35 when Star Wars came out.
But he needed to be 35. Han Solo could not have been a child, and I mean that by someone younger than me.
Oh, God, I just remember he was in Expendables 3, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's not exactly a highlight either. Although I think I'm going to have to buy a copy because that has Atmos, doesn't it?
Yes.
And it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's the least worst of the current options.
Yeah, if you want an Atmos system, you have to punish yourself at the moment. It's just how far do you want to punish yourself?
I've got John Wick with an Atmos soundtrack, and that is a movie I quite enjoyed. Actually, I thought it was quite good. Transformers, yeah, definitely. Expendables 3, okay. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, today, Mockingjay Part 1 arrives, so that's my 5th Atmos movie. And at the end of the month, Gravity comes out, which I am genuinely looking forward to. So.
Just think, you could probably keep pace with this quite easily and own every Atmos film ever made.
That's my plan.
Well, he did that with 3D, didn't he?
For a period of time, and then eventually I gave up. He'd let go of that balloon eventually.
You weren't the only one that gave up on that. Right, anyway. So, Harrison Ford, he's still with us. We're all still extremely happy about that, and hope he recovers quickly. So, let's look at what we can win this week, Steve, because you don't talk enough on these podcasts, so we need to get you to do this bit.
Well, let's be honest, you've only got 2 people to choose from, haven't you, really?
I did Ed last week, I think. So
yeah, exactly.
It was last week, didn't it?
Anyway, it's the same prizes as last week, in fact, so we could just play last week's tape.
All right, okay.
Just cue Hodge. It's a Thermaltake Core X9 PC case from Scan, which the competition runs till the 31st of March, so you've got plenty of time for that one still. And also 2 pairs of Soundmagic P30S headphones, which we know from Ed are excellent. I think they're worth about £60 each.
70.
£70. Well, there you go. Mm. And that's 20th of April. That runs still, so you've got bags of time on that one too. So there will be another competition prize coming very soon this week, I think, for 3 copies. It will be available of the Blu-ray of the film The Necessary Death of Charlie Countryman, starring Shia LaBeouf, speaking of Crystal Skull. And
no, we didn't mention Crystal Skull.
I did mention it
briefly.
I did briefly mention it.
Yeah.
Trying to forget it.
I must have wiped that from my mind then, Steve.
Yes, that's going to be a competition prize too, very soon, probably this week. But probably by the time this podcast goes up, it will be up on the site. So not a massive amount, but some good prizes there, worth winning. So
I keep reading,
guys, enter.
The thermal take. I've been doing so much work with
I think it says thermal cake whenever I look at it.
No, I'm having more of a Scandinavian issue at the moment. I keep seeing it as thermaltike, which is probably not the same thing. It was like spudgy, like spudulike.
Right, okay, let's move on to hardware news and let's sandwich it between some Ask the Idiots questions. So let's go to an Ask the Idiot question first of all. And this one suits Ed right down to the ground. I have a new AVR, but there doesn't seem to be a connection for a phono stage or a ground lead. How do I connect the turntable to the AVR?
This is an answer of 2 halves, Brian. Most turntables, that is, say, the overwhelming majority on sale, do not have a phono stage built into them. So for connecting the vast majority of turntables to AVRs in this situation with no phono stage, you're looking at an external phono stage, which just sits between the turntable and the AV receiver and boosts the signal up to something which is going to work properly with the AV amplifier. That is also going to take care of your ground at the same time. They all... I don't recall ever encountering a phono stage which didn't have a ground connection on it. Yep. So if you don't have a phono stage built into the turntable, that's your logical option. External phono stages go from about £40 and up. And when I say up, there are examples in the mid-teens of thousands. If you really decide to go all out, phono stages have to do something very, very complicated. They're taking a tiny, tiny signal, and they are. If you wanted to make, it's not a technically correct comparison, but if you think it's like trying to upscale a John Logie Baird 120 line picture image to 4K. you've got to take, I mean, if you're talking moving coil cartridges, my moving coil cartridge has 0.3 millivolts output, and no amplifier is going to work desperately well with anything less than a volt. So the amount of actual signal ramping is pretty large, and you have to do that without introducing noise or other nastiness. So it's one of those things. It's a simple process that it has to do, but the actual mechanics of doing it are pretty involved. So no, there is obviously a lot of diminishing returns set in big time on this, but nonetheless, it's one area where there are dividends to spending a bit more, and there are more ways than one to skin a cat. I mean, if you're a valve amp user, and I dare say that there aren't too many of them on the podcast, there are pros and cons to actually using a two-stage process where you boost the signal using a passive coil, which sounds like a contraceptive, but it isn't, and then going to a moving magnet phono stage, which is, needless to say, fairly expensive, but extremely effective. I did say it's an answer of two parts, and this is specific because actually the turntable I've just reviewed and is waiting in the wings in the AVForums content system has a phono stage on board. So it will send a line level signal to an amplifier without a phono stage, which is brilliant, except that it still needs to ground. So that's more complicated. So if you don't have an amplifier with a ground, you have two options really. A number of manufacturers will quite happily admit if there is a point on the chassis which will act as a ground on your product. There are a number of products where that is the case. Otherwise, there are aftermarket ways and means of just adding a little sort of grounding point to anything with a three pin mains connection on it. So that's a very specific issue if you've actually just bought a turntable with a phono stage on board, and that will still need to ground. But there aren't that many of those, to be fair.
Thank you, Ed. That was quite comprehensive.
It was.
That was almost professional.
Very comprehensive. Yeah, we're doing something wrong here. Yes, we're doing something wrong.
I've just switched over to autopilot. As I say, I was explaining beforehand, I am somewhat sleep deprived at the moment.
Yeah, so, and you're not in the lavatory, even though it sounds echoey. You're sitting somewhere else. I am indeed not sat on the throne. I'm sat in the conservatory. It's jolly nice. Okay, let's move on. And LG announced their TV lineup last week. Steve, you went along to this at Mercedes-Benz World. Did you get to drive some Mercedes?
I did not, very disappointingly. I got to see some quite nice-looking classic Mercedes that were on display in Mercedes World, which was quite cool. But there was no driving in Mercedes, unfortunately.
So you go all the way to Mercedes World and you don't even get to drive a car.
No. So I mean, I did wonder why they were holding it at Mercedes World when their offices are in Slough, which obviously would have been significantly more convenient for me coming from the West Country. But it turned out the reason that they were there, I was also thinking, because Sony are very near, you could see them, they were over the road. I thought, why are you holding an event opposite Sony's offices? But it turns out they're about to move offices to a big new building that's just been built in the same area, and that was why they were holding it there, so they could show us their new offices at the same time. Not actually go inside, but just show us, literally point at them. Go, that's on your offices over there. Oh, right, okay. That was one of the reasons. Yeah, it seems like a strange place to pick, but I have been there before. I was there for an event with Panasonic.
I've been there, Steve, ever since I started in this trade, and that place was built. There's been launches there. I've lost count how many times I've been there. Lost count how many times I've gawped at that gull-wing doored Mercedes as you walk in.
What, the 50s one, the 300 SL?
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
A mighty car.
£1 million easy.
Depends on the provenance. It is also, it's exciting and almost unique in the annals of classic cars, where it's one of I think only 2 or 3 examples where the car with the roof is worth more than the convertible.
Now, Ed, you're being too helpful again. Let's back it off a bit.
I'm just sorry. I'm maybe prompting you.
Why the useful information today instead of just full of bollocks?
Sorry. Well, I'm looking at some of the posts coming in on the Apple conference thread on the forums.
Yes, we'll come to that in a minute.
A rich vein of angry.
Anyway,
a rich vein of vitriol pouring across the internet.
Anyway, LG.
Yeah. So the reason I was there was not to look at Mercedes cars. The reason I was there was because LG were launching their new lineup for this year, new TV lineup, well, the new AV lineup actually. So it was not just TVs, but there were also various other AV products. And I've got to say that since I was there, which was last Tuesday, I think there's been quite a lot of confusion online, which I don't think LG have helped with. Because they haven't exactly been forthcoming with info, or if they have been, it's been quite contradictory information. Certainly, when I was there on Tuesday, we went into the main sort of display area they had in Mercedes World, and there was a big bank of OLED televisions. It was the EC930V, which is the TV that we reviewed towards the end of last year, the 55-inch Full HD OLED. So they had a bank of those on display, and that will continue to be available this year, apparently. So you can still buy that currently. They also had the 65-inch EC970V, which is the 4K OLED television that we saw at their offices in Slough back at the end of September.
I believe we discussed that on a podcast back then, didn't we?
Yes, they announced they showed it to us and then said it would be available before Christmas in the UK. Obviously, we're now into March. We've seen no sight nor sound of this television. It was originally priced, or rumoured to be priced, at $5,999. They said at the event last week that it will actually be nearer $6,500. So it's going to be about $6,499 for the 65-inch 4K OLED TV, which has already been available in Korea and in America, and will be available in the UK. They claim, they told me, at the end of April. There've been other people saying in March to April. They said to me, I said, well, when will it be available really in stores? He said end of April. He also said at the same time, selected retailers. I don't know what that means. If that means it's going to be available in Harrods, that does not, in my book, count as being available to the general public. Anyway, that's going to be available. There is also, certainly on their website, and also mentioned on some of the European events, the the 55 EG 960V, which is their 55-inch 4K OLED. Now, when I asked them about that, they said there would be a 4K OLED available in this third quarter, and a price that would be comparable to where the current 55-inch Full HD OLED is, which is about $2,500. So if you're looking at sort of $2,500 to $3,000, 4K OLED 55-inch, that's a pretty good price. Now, other people have been saying that they're going to launch the EG 960V in sort of March, April, which kind of makes you think, why are they still running the full? They've got the Full HD, they've got this coming out, they're going to have something at IFA. I don't know. I've asked them to clarify. They haven't answered that question. I've asked them two very similar questions. When is the 65-inch coming out, and how much will it cost, and where can you buy it? And when is the 55-inch coming out, how much will it cost, and where can you buy it? That seems pretty straightforward questions to me, but they've been unable to answer that. If I had to take a bet here, I would say that we'll probably see the 65-inch 4K OLED in very limited numbers at very selected retailers at the end of next month for $6,500. But you're not going to really see it. It's not going to be a real product in any way or shape or form. And we'll more likely see them do a big launch of the 55-inch at IFA when they've got significant numbers of product to sell. I think the problem is they were claiming they've kind of made big gains in terms of actually being able to produce viable yields of the OLED panels, which hopefully is true because we all love OLED and I want it to be a success. But they need to build up stocks. I mean, and that's certainly going to, if they're having trouble making units for themselves, that certainly means that other manufacturers who are thinking of using their panels to make their own 4K OLEDs are going to have problems too. And I noticed that a company like Panasonic, who were at one point quite bullish about getting a TV out this year, seem to be slipping into next year now. So all I can say is, if anyone starts saying we're going to start seeing loads of 4K OLEDs in the shops this month or next month, I would take a serious reality check. I don't think that's going to be the case. I just can't see it happening. I hope it does, but I'd be very surprised.
Shame, but I don't disagree.
The thing is that, LG have spoken a lot about, I've been to, where did we go to the Monaco launch? 3 years ago, wasn't it? 3 years in May. And since then, I've probably been told about 10 different models, but I've seen 2. So I take everything they say with a big pinch of salt now, and I say, well, when it's in the stores, when we've got a review sample in. I mean, obviously, I'm I'm a massive fan of OLED. I think for me, without doubt, it's the technology of the future. It's, I want it to be a huge success. I want them to be able to make them in large numbers and get the prices down and make it a mass market product. But there's a lot of stalling here at the moment while they.
Well, there is that, but at the same time, Steve, we live in an internet obsessed world where everything has to happen yesterday, and people get very impatient very quickly, especially on our forums. And I love our forums, but there are people on our forums who do take things too seriously. All the comments and threads and this will never happen, that will never happen. Yes, there's been delays. it's a brand new technology, and there's only one company pumping money into it, and that's LG at the minute. So,
So we should at least be grateful for them for doing that. I mean, I'm not knocking LG here. At least they're doing that. I just think maybe they should be a bit more honest. I mean, it's difficult though, because you don't want to be too honest, because at the same time, you've got people like Samsung or any other manufacturers who are, say, for example, doing curved screens, which is obviously something that was initially being done only with OLED screens, plus pushing LED LCD technology to the limits of what it's capable of doing. And I have to say, based on what I've seen so far, producing some extremely good televisions in the process.
Yes, but like the Apple Watch, seriously overpriced.
Well, certainly the 9500 is. The 9000, I think, will be a slightly more realistic price for a flagship TV, which is what I've got in at the moment. And that's essentially the same as the 9500, except it doesn't have the full direct array backlight and the chamfered bezel. That's about the only two. Oh, no built-in camera. Those are the only differences that I can see. Otherwise, it's basically the same TV. So you will be able to get a slightly cheaper version. With all the benefits, of HDR and 10-bit video and a wider colour space.
Well, see, that was something that you said LG were pretty quiet on, and that was the whole HDR.
Yes, sorry, I get on to
and
that's the OLED side of things. Not much news there, in all honesty, at the moment, as far as I can tell. Hopefully, we'll get more as the year goes on. But right now, from what they had, what I saw and what they told me, at the moment, it's 65-inch 4K OLED in the end of April, and the current Full HD 55-inch OLED as well. Moving on to the LED LCD lineup, they had their flagship UF970V, which is 950V, sorry, UF950V, which is Ultra HD LED LCD television, very much like Sony's X9. Is it?
You're not going to get any help from me.
X90. Yeah, don't know. Whatever they've called it, the one that's really, really thin.
Yeah.
Like about
well, it's really, really thin at the top. At the top 5 inches of the screen. And
well, LG have got basically the same principle. Their new flagship is similar. It's 8mm deep for about 2/3 of the screen size, and the bottom, obviously, where the electronics and the speakers are, it's deeper. They've got it. So again, it's the panel is sort of pressed into a metal backplate. I think they're basically sort of porting across a lot of the technology they use for making phones now to make it these sort of very thin, metallic, quite attractive looking panels with virtually no bezel whatsoever. But obviously, there's a lot of electronics at the bottom, and that's also where the LEDs are. And this is the same with the Sony. I think it's worth pointing this out, that the LEDs are in the bottom, so the backlight is basically coming up from the bottom and bouncing off the back of the a mirror behind the panel, which means that you do get kind of columns of light coming up from where the lights are.
Well, I mean, I've never seen a slim designed TV that hasn't had backlighting issues LED wise.
No, I don't know why they're doing it too, because one of the big things about OLED is it's ultra thin, because it's like 3.5-4 millimeters deep.
Yeah.
So pushing to make LED TVs that thin seems to be taking away some of the appeal of an OLED screen. So it's strange. But anyway, that's their flagship model. It has quantum dots, so it's got the wider color space. But as you just mentioned earlier, Phil, they were pretty quiet on the subject of HDR. They said they're working on that, but these TVs, from what I can work out, are not HDR compliant at all. They also didn't answer the question about whether they were 10-bit, genuinely 10-bit. So difficult to say. I think the majority of LED LCD TVs that will be on sale this year will not be compliant with the upcoming 4K standards.
No, because just look back at CES. I mean, the whole thing about HDR, 10-bit, wider colour space, all the rest, it was to take attention away from OLED and to get another year's worth of sales out of LED LCD TVs. That's me being cynical, but actually looking at the market, that's exactly the way it's going, because nobody's going to make the investment in the new technology, which is OLED. So
otherwise, LG's range is, obviously there's I think they've got 4. So they've got the 2 OLEDs currently on sale, one coming and one on sale. 4 Ultra HD models coming this year, and they're planning on getting them into the shops pretty quickly. They said this year, earlier than they did last year. So this month and next month, they should have the majority of the ranges in stores. So you've got the UF950, the UF860, the UF770, and then the entry level 49-inch Ultra HD 4K TV. That's the UF675. That one, I believe, will not have HDMI 2.0, but it will have things like Netflix built in, so you can still watch 4K content. So it's a bit limited, but then it's going to be 900 quid. So they're going for a sort of entry-level, cheap Ultra HD TV. But over 60% of their entire lineup will be Ultra HD. So like we see with other manufacturers, less and less full HD being made. Mostly their products. I mean, I think next year you're going to see 70, 80% 4K, and almost no full HD, except maybe smaller screen sizes for other rooms like bedrooms or kitchens or something like that. But certainly, and also bigger screen sizes again. So a lot of the models, 65, 55-inch screen sizes. Although they do go down as far as 40-inch on Ultra HD on the 770 line. So I don't know how much benefit you're going to get out of a 40-inch screen, but there you go. Yeah. They also had some of their AV stuff online. I'll show. So sound bars, wireless speakers, multi-room speakers, and a Blu-ray player. And there'll be a bigger launch of their multi-room system in the summer.
Surprising, it's just one Blu-ray player this year.
I thought, blimey, that's a sign of the times, isn't it?
Really,
obviously,
really is.
That either means Blu-ray is just gradually being phased out as far as the manufacturers are concerned, or they're hopefully going to do something with 4K Blu-ray towards the end of this year, beginning of next year. But just the one Blu-ray model we saw. So, and I'm trying to think, were there many? There weren't many at the Panasonic convention either, weren't there? I'm
just racking my brains. I can't remember seeing any.
I remember seeing a couple.
Some there, but
nothing that we hadn't. Yeah, there was. I think they had maybe one or two models.
Hang on a second. Let's be pragmatic here. Unless your Blu-ray player has broken, why would you possibly need another one?
No, you don't need another one, obviously.
We have established beyond reasonable doubt that ultimately they all have fundamentally the same picture quality when it comes to Blu-ray without processing on.
Yep.
So you're talking bells and whistles. I haven't seen any new bells or whistles being added to these things, certainly at the sort of standard, low to mid-price range price points. So why would you bother? The manufacturers have responded to the fact they have nothing. They bring nothing new to the table.
I think
so. This is literally just these are placeholders for people that inadvertently need one through theft, loss, or stupidity.
Well, there is that, but there's also, some manufacturers have really been pushing out the boat, like Panasonic having full streaming capability, adding other components in there, and blah blah blah. So it's not just a Blu-ray player.
But again, that's been happening for a couple of years. It's come down in price a bit. I mean, obviously the original sort of drivers for that were Oppo and so on and so forth. But again, I would argue if you wanted that functionality, you'd probably have it already.
Probably.
So again, I just from a manufacturer's perspective, I'm in many ways delighted that LG went to the effort of doing one.
It was a little rinky-dink one too. I think the reason it was there was because it ties in with their multi-room system and that kind of stuff, which I guess is the only new bell and whistle they could add.
Indeed, there you go.
And notice there wasn't, or certainly didn't come across in your coverage much in the way of WebOS talk of the. No,
well, it's funny because we got a demo of WebOS at CES. We had a similar demo again from Darren at this event, and he basically. It's basically the same. There's some minor tweaks here and there, but it's essentially the same system. And I guess that what that does is reflect on how good WebOS was to begin with. I mean, it was a great system straight out of the gates. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So there wasn't very little they could do to make it better. They've made a few tweaks here and there, but essentially it's the same platform. And yeah, like I said, it's a great system. So what could you really do to improve it, really?
Yeah.
Well, speaking of out of date in 6 months, isn't this a neat segue to?
Yeah, the Apple Watch. Christ, we had to wait long enough. Some nice new MacBook Air there, Steve. I don't know if you've had a look at it, but it looks absolutely gorgeous. Really nice notebook. So we had to go through all of that, and I think it was about 50 or 55 minutes into the press conference before we got to see the Apple Watch. Now, you need an iPhone 5 or above to use it. You have to have your phone with you. They're saying 16 to 18 hours battery charge. That ain't going to last that long. You're going to have to charge it every day. And starting price is, I think...
I'm trying to work it out. I'm looking at our own
post
here. $350, approximately £230. It'll be 3 different collections. Watch Sport, and Watch Editions.
Watch Edition starts at $8,000.
Yeah, essentially the Watch Editions is, if you like, it's a wonderful litmus test for people around you, and fundamentally, if you're friends with someone that buys an Editions Apple Watch, you know that they are probably not worth retaining the friendship of. ultimately, it's a big deal to spend that much money on any watch. To spend it on a watch with these basic limitations as a timepiece, and that has, let's not beat around the bush, been designed by the company that pretty much pioneered planned obsolescence. You'd have to. I mean, I don't. I mean, you know, I have some understanding of narcotics, and I still don't know which ones you'd have to be on before this is a good idea.
The most expensive.
If you do think it's a good idea, please feel free to get in touch. Just from a respectable distance.
The most expensive is £13,500 for a watch. Steve, just think of how many bananas you could buy for that.
Yeah, you can get a lot of bananas for that, can you?
But then, on a more prosaic note,
you can get a really, really good watch
for
for 13 grand that will last you for
a lifetime.
Your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, the rest of your life. A really classic Patek Philippe or something really, a really nice timepiece. Why you'd want to spend that on something that's going to, A, battery won't last a day, and B, will be obsolete in 3 or 4 years' time.
6 months.
Is beyond me. But, and I like Apple stuff, but that's just ridiculous. But I guess that's catering to a very specific and very small part of the market. I don't think it's worth £249. You know, I think I've got a watch, I've got a phone. I don't look at the phone very often anyway. I don't get that many texts and phone calls. I don't really care. I don't think if I need to know the time, I look at my wrist. What's the point?
I suspect that they'll sell a great many of them. What I think might be more interesting is I'd be prepared to wager that the next range of them will be substantively smaller in number, and I think it's a one-time only thing, unless 0 point energy is cracked and these things can behave in something approaching the way of a normal watch in terms of the lifespan. They're trinkets, they're toys for people that have nothing better to do.
I mean, you've got to look at it, Ed. I mean, they only sold 700 million iPhones up until this week, so this is a good way to shift even more iPhones, because you need an iPhone 5 or above before you can even use the thing. So if you want an Apple Watch and you ain't got an iPhone 5 or above, you're going to have to buy another iPhone as well. They do at least have the advantage
of a good installed user base. And I don't doubt, I need to be clear on that, I don't doubt that if you really genuinely believe that functionality that a smartwatch offers is of use to you, this will be the best one at doing it. But, I mean, this may be a sign of me getting old. I don't need that functionality. I don't need another device in my life that needs to be charged daily. I just can't bring, again, maybe it's an age thing, but even, $350 on something which will be utterly obsolete.
I mean, for me, it was more of a fat thing than an age thing, Ed. I don't want a watch telling me that I've been sitting down too long.
This is true.
I need to run up a hill.
It would probably start summoning the emergency services in my case, but. Those are trinkets. If you can't turn them off, that's just remedial. But I just know I don't. And I suppose there is differentiation, and there is the halo product effect from making these editions ones. But if you are seriously considering spending the list price on an editions watch, please, for the love of whatever deity or not you may have some vested interest in, go and talk to a proper jeweler. Go and spend an afternoon seeing what other options are available for the same money, and then reconsider the Apple Watch. That
was very noble of you, but nobody's going to listen. Not that demographic. They're going to go and buy it.
Well, no, they won't buy the editions ones. I mean, the the Venn diagram of people that. As I say, I assume they have a halo product role. They can be shipped into certain locations, Harrods, and everyone can go, "Oh, look at that! It's a £250 watch wrapped in a stupid case."
I have no doubt Stephen Fry will have one.
Yeah, but they'll give him one, so it's not quite the same, is it? If they give me one, I'll use the bugger, but I'm not going to pay for it.
If they give me one, I'll melt it down.
If they give me one, I'll sell it on eBay.
No, on the classified, Steve.
Yeah, I would actually
turn it into a Krugerrand, and then just deal with the rest of it somewhere else.
Trade it for some bananas.
I don't know. Their planned obsolescence is pretty high, unless you really are going for it food wise. You can't even make booze out of bananas.
Can you not?
Well, you
Sure,
can make
you can make booze out of anything.
You can
can't
make creme de banane, but that requires another number of other bits and bobs to actually be of any use. And at the end of it, it's still creme de banane. That used to be in our horrible drinks cabinet at university of stuff that you just consumed for bets, dares, and when there was literally nothing else.
That was like the stuff in your parents' drinks cabinet, or there was always those drinks.
No. We used to, when we would go on holiday or whatever, you'd come back clutching the worst thing you could find. And we just accrued a particularly magnificent cabinet of horror. Say it was creme de banane, some sort of pre-mixed eggnog. That was pretty revolting.
Yeah. Advocaat used to sit in my parents' For Christmas, the same bottle will be in the corner of the drinks cabinet, never being touched. And I was always fascinated by this yellowy substance. I thought, what is it?
Pus. But yeah, it's the same basic principle. Bananas are not a good booze base. Contain a load of apples, on the other hand. You're laughing. Good bust load of cider and then a bit of Calvados to round off.
You see, this is your investment banking past coming back to haunt you here, Stevie. Went for bananas and it should have been apples.
Well, no, because I wasn't thinking of making it into alcohol.
That's because you're wrong.
The monkeys when they take over the planet.
We need to plug the upcoming games podcast that is coming up this weekend. So there's no Mark on the podcast. We've got no games news, but the games podcast is coming. It should be this Saturday. That's the 14th of March. If gaming is your thing, don't forget to download that. Right, let's move on quickly, and we're going to do movie news next. Right, Steve, did you actually go to the cinema this week?
Yes, I could be asked to go to the cinema this week.
Right, okay.
In fact, not only did I go to the cinema this week, I saw two films that I really enjoyed. It was good. It was a good weekend. One was Kill the Messenger.
What have you done with the real Stephen Withers?
I saw Kill the Messenger, which is the new film starring Jeremy Renner, better known perhaps as Hawkeye, from the Avengers, or possibly as Matt Damon's substitute in the Bourne movies.
Or the bad guy in SWAT.
Is he the bad guy in SWAT?
He is.
I haven't seen SWAT in so many years, I can't remember. I thought, is it Jeremy Renner?
Yes.
Ah, right. Anyway, yes, he plays, it's a true story. It's based upon the true story of a journalist, who played by Jeremy Renner, who works for the San Jose Mercury, so a small paper, but he's investigating various drug-related stories, particularly the way the government has a habit of seizing people's property, even though they're not necessarily found guilty of any crimes, which seems slightly undemocratic. And gets a tip-off from the girlfriend of a drug dealer who's currently on trial about government involvement in their business, and he begins to investigate it, and it becomes apparent that what was going on was, at the very least, the CIA was turning a blind eye to these Nicaraguan drug dealers who were shipping in shed loads of cocaine from Central America and then using the money to fund the Contras fighting against the Sandinista government in Nicaragua. This is in the mid-'80s, when at the time Congress had stopped, was trying to stop the Reagan administration from doing what it was doing in Central America, and the Reagan administration was finding any way it possibly could to circumvent that. And one of the ways they were doing it was obviously Oliver North selling weapons to Iran, or to raise money to use it to fund their operations in Central America, and particularly in Nicaragua. And this apparently was one of the other ways they were doing it, flogging drugs into the States. Now, they've got some form in this particular area, because obviously they were doing that during the Vietnam War, shipping heroin out on what was known as Air America, again, as a way of funding their black ops, surreptitiously. So it didn't come as a massive surprise. Now, at the very least, they were turning a blind eye. The possibility was that they were being actively involved in this, and specifically selling crack cocaine into US ghettos in US cities. So, in other words, they didn't really care about the fact that the drugs were being sold to black and Hispanic populations within America. So that raises the ugly head, of racism, as well as, being undemocratic, unconstitutional, and generally illegal. Anyway, he publishes a story, and initially it's received as being like this, this great scoop. But then the sort of established media turns on him, supporting their friends in the CIA and in the government, and he gets accused of making stuff up. And a lot of his sources, obviously, were all drug dealers anyway. Renege on their stories and start backtracking. And the film deals with both him investigating the story and then the after effects of it, and particularly the way that it essentially destroys his life. I thought it was a great movie. It was something I wasn't really familiar with until after I'd seen the film. Thought it was a fascinating movie. Very, very similar in tone to a lot of the sort of 70s. Obviously, things like All the President's Men. But also films like The Parallax View, that kind of 70s paranoia was very much inherent in the film. Jeremy Renner gave a fantastic performance. I mean, he's a good actor. I mean, he's done a lot of perhaps less serious stuff of late, but it's a reminder that he's a very good actor that's got a great cast, often in very small parts. But overall, a really good movie. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I thought it was excellent. Gave that, I think, a 7 out of 10. Possibly an 8. I can't remember now. Maybe it was an 8. Yes, I think it was an 8. And then I saw Chappie, which is the new film from Neil Blomkamp, who made District 9 and Elysium, and has some good elements to it. But I've got to say, Neil Blomkamp he's turning into a one-trick pony, because if you've seen District 9 and parts of Elysium, this is like, an amalgam of the two. Basically, I think it's been described quite regularly as sort of RoboCop meets Short Circuit, and that is a pretty good description of what it is. It's set in a year's time, in fact, set in 2016, where the South African police force in Johannesburg are deploying robots called Scouts as part of their police force. And one of these robots, is used by the guy that developed them as a sort of test bed for a sentient AI program. So it's got elements of RoboCop, it's got elements of Short Circuit, it's got elements of Transcendence, which came out last year. It's got elements of Ex Machina, which was only earlier this year. And all this kind of stuff is jumbled together. Plus, it's set in Joburg. It's got large chunks of District 9 in there. I think this is the third film in a row now where I've seen, Neil Blomkamp deploy some kind of exoskeleton, unit that looks very much like the Ed 109. No offense, Ed. From RoboCop, Ed 209. Sorry, yes, the Ed 209 from RoboCop. It's got some good bits in it. What's really good in it is the way that Sharto Copley, who sort of mocaps and voices Chappie, the way that Chappie develops, from effectively a baby, the AI evolves and grows and learns. That bit was really well done. And the effects, and one thing Neil Blomkamp's really good at is combining digital effects with real world effects. And that's seamless in it. And that is really impressive. It's nice to see Hugh Jackman playing a villain for a change. That's interesting. The film's let down a little bit by the fact that two of the main protagonists are two rappers from South Africa who I've never heard of. Not that they're bad performers necessarily, but you just don't like their characters. And he's got a problem. He's got a problem making films about unlikable people. And it's difficult to empathise with a character if you don't like them. You like Chappie, you empathise with him, but you don't necessarily empathise with anybody else in the film. But his development, so it's kind of like a sort of sweet, Chappie's you kind of like him. He's growing up and developing. He starts off as a baby, as a toddler, as a teenager, etc. And it's also got loads of violence and swearing, and so you're not quite sure who the film's really aimed at, because it's too violent and sweary for kids. But a lot of the Chappie stuff is quite sweet and cute and would appeal to children. So it's a strange mismatch of genres, competently made. But I think he needs to start doing something different. If he's going to be doing a new Alien film, he needs a decent script, good actors, and he needs to, get the hell out of Johannesburg for once and do something a bit different. But, if you're a fan of Blomkamp, then certainly you'll know what to expect and you won't be disappointed. I did enjoy large parts of it, but, I just felt like at the end of the day, I've seen all this before and there's nothing in there that's new.
Okay.
I think Kaz gave it. I remember what Kaz gave it. Did he give it 7 out of 10 or 6 out of 10? I'd have given it a 6 out of 10.
Okay, cool. So that's what was at the cinema this week, and Steve actually decided to go. Some bad news just breaking that we will bring you, and that is Sam Simon, who was the co-creator of The Simpsons. It's just been announced that he's died at the age of 59. He had colon cancer. He won 9 Emmys for his work on The Simpsons, and he was a writer, director, and executive producer. So he left The Simpsons after series 4, or the fourth season, under a deal that allowed him to continue receiving royalties as a co-founder or creator.
Co-creator.
Well, actually, I mean, reading his bio, he sounds like a really nice guy who's channeled a lot of his career into charity work and helping social causes and so on.
Channeled much of his vast wealth, you mean?
You are a crow banana. You really are. But sad news. I can't remember the last time I watched The Simpsons.
No, I haven't seen it in years.
Much prefer Family Guy.
Well, even that's losing its...
It is a bit, yeah.
I'm watching season 10 at the moment, I think, or season 11, the most recent season, and it's got some laughs in it, but you kind of feel like they're just going through the motions a bit now.
He's more interested in his film career.
Well, I think no one else is, unfortunately, for him. I noticed he's had to go back to Ted, a desperate attempt to get some success. And it's like, well, Ted was great as it was, and it ended nicely, and it nowhere else to go. And now you've ditched Mila Kunis, and as the trailer I saw had had shit written all over it, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, whatever sympathy, ultimately, he has probably made enough money to avoid being out on the street for the rest of his days. So I dare say he will be all right, even if he has gone off the boil.
Yeah, I'm not particularly sad for Seth MacFarlane. I'm just saying that Family Guy is not especially funny anymore.
Yeah, he was a bit over-ambitious with his girlfriends in A Million Ways to Die in the West.
Amanda Seyfried and Charlize Theron.
As if.
Yeah, you wish, Seth. So then again, if you are writing and directing and producing a film, I'd be casting someone pretty fit next to me as well.
I'd have far more sex scenes.
Funnily enough, the funniest person in A Million Ways to Die in the West is Charlize Theron.
Yeah.
I've never seen
Anyway,
it. So
don't bother.
don't worry, I wasn't rushing.
Well, clearly you aren't rushing now.
Stream it. That's probably the best way.
Is there a particular streaming service you might recommend for me to do?
There are numerous, Ed. Numerous on the market.
Okay. Right, okay.
Right, coming this Friday to cinemas, Steve, is
Run All Night, the latest action film starring action hero Liam Neeson. Because Swanee once used to be a serious actor, but apparently now he's just happy to chin out one action film after the other. And as you said earlier, take the paychecks. This one, I've seen the trailer for this one actually, and he basically has to kill a friend of his son to save his own son, and the friend, played by Ed Harris, comes after him with everything he's got, presumably in the course of a single night, to get his revenge. It looked fairly formulaic, but that's opening on Friday. And the other thing is coming out is X+Y, which is I think, and I must admit, I know very little about this film other than it's a British movie with a really interesting British cast, including Sally Hawkins and Eddie Marzan, but about a young kid who's a maths genius. So.
Wow.
I'm guessing that's not going to be rattling the
was that
box office this weekend.
Was that maths or maths?
Maths.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so my money's on Run All Night taking the money this weekend. But those are the two films that are opening on Friday.
Okay, and Blu-rays next week.
There's only one major Blu-ray out next week,
and
it's presumably everything else is generally avoided this release week. But it's The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1. The prelude to all the main good stuff being in Part 2.
I don't understand. I don't understand the title. What's Mockingjay?
Mockingjay is the name given to the lead character in The Hunger Games. She's become it's a symbol of resistance against the totalitarian government. So she is the Mockingjay.
Right.
So there you go.
But the good news is the Blu-ray has an Atmos soundtrack.
Oh, hey! For all 5 people who've got Atmos set up.
And, interestingly, a DTS-X headphone soundtrack. I'll give it a go. Interesting, I see.
I've heard that about you. Okay, let's move on to some serious questions. Ask the Idiots from Choco Bear. He asks, guys, what crisp can you throw the furthest?
I think there's only one candidate.
Well, hang on, because this was posted. Let me just find the time. This was posted 6 hours ago. So for 6 hours, we've been thinking about nothing else. But
before we can even begin to answer this question, we have to establish how you define a crisp.
Well,
actually,
for example,
I've seen what you've.
Is a Twiglet a crisp?
No, actually, you've. Let me just bring up the original question, because let me just check it is crisp that he's defining here. Yes, it is. It's crisp that he's defining. But then he does go on to say, I asked the question to some friends and it got heated because does a mini cheddar count as a crisp or a biscuit?
Well, I think that counts as a biscuit, but a Phineas Fogg Mignon Morceau is a crisp, and it's quite a dense, flat crisp.
Yeah, because they make them round here, Ed. Just like 5 minutes up the road to make them.
Well, I reckon that's where you'd need to look ballistic.
Medhamsley Road Concert.
For a decent throwing crisp.
Right, okay.
That would be my vote. Certainly if we're talking about taking them out of the pack, because if we're keeping them in the pack, Pringles every time.
But it's just a bazooka Pringles jar, isn't it?
Let's face it. You can get there's reasonable mass, some aerodynamic properties, and just a density of packaging which very few other crisps can get.
Now you see this, opens up other questions when we're talking about loads of physics. Is this indoors or outdoors? Is there wind resistance in this? And I'm not just talking about...
Are you proposing throwing the crisp in a vacuum? Because you can throw it an awful long way under those. Well, you can until you explode.
On the move.
Anyway.
I reckon I can get that Twiglet to go a long way.
And are you simply doing just an overarm toss, or are we allowed to build some sort of machinery with which to cast the crisp?
A catapult. You can build a
crisp-apult.
I mean, there are obvious crisps that you can immediately make. A Quaver, it would be too light. Monster Munch, they're pretty big.
Yeah, but they're not
they're
very
too
dense.
light. They're not very dense.
A McCoy is a pretty dense. If you went, when you open the pack and there's basically, you realise actually there's just like 2 in there, but each one is the size of a baked potato. One of those could probably be lost a fair distance.
Well, I see I've got some in my hand here at the minute. Groove cut potato chips, spicy chicken, Nando's.
Oh, God.
I know you like Nando's, Phil, but that's ridiculous. Are you buying Nando's crisps now?
Yes, spicy chicken ones.
Guaranteed contains no chicken. Check the packaging. I bet you it's suitable for vegetarians.
No, it doesn't say that anywhere. Let me just
Phil, was I with you when we went to Nando's and they said they didn't have any chicken? But that's all you sell.
You had one job.
Yeah, no, seriously, we went to Nando's and they said,
where was that again? Oh, it was opposite JVC. It was at
Brent Cross. It was in Brent Cross Shopping
Brent Cross,
Centre.
yeah.
and we came into the restaurant. The woman said, "Sorry, we don't have any chicken." Isn't that all you do? Why are you open if you haven't got any chicken? And how did you run out? It was like a run on. Was there a run on the place before we got there? Very strange.
I mean, I don't go to it.
I'm beginning to think they just didn't want us there. You know,
I was
all
so
of
angry.
Nando's just annoys me. I mean, I went to a gourmet burger kitchen last week. I'd go once every 2 years to remind myself of why I only go once every 2 years. It's perfectly all right, but it's massively. There in no way, shape, or form does the perfectly adequate meal you receive coincide with the vast price they then ask for it.
Yeah, it was at the burger place, that gourmet burger thing. It's like it's just Nando's but for burgers, isn't it? It's the same thing. Just replace the chicken with burgers.
Yes, and for that reason, in so much as it's a little easier to mess beef up, I have fractionally more time for it, but it is nonetheless heartbreakingly expensive for what it is.
I think you would have to have the chicken on the bone to throw it furthest, though, wouldn't you? Compared to a burger.
Yeah.
Are we throwing food still?
Yeah. We're just throwing chicken in burgers now.
Yeah, but clearly a drumstick would get. You can get some distance with a drumstick, couldn't you?
Oh yeah, you could get some good spinach on that. As in spinning it. Not Popeye.
The problem is that going into Nando's and throwing the food around, that's an expensive ballistics test, isn't it?
It is a bit, yeah.
And if you get spicy sauce in someone's eye, you're looking at a lawsuit.
See, we're throwing these crisps. Are we just throwing the crisps, or are we attaching the crisp to a rocket? Well, I can get cricket because I go quite a long way if I, attach it to some other device.
Yeah, you could attach it to your bananas.
What you're proposing to put the first crisp into orbit.
Oh, I'm assuming that there's been a few crisps already eaten in space, isn't there?
I don't know. Isn't it one of those foodstuffs where tiny little fragments in zero gravity can then ruin expensive equipment?
If that's the case, how come we always see astronauts mucking about in zero G by squirting orange juice at each other? And isn't that making a bit of a mess?
As I understand it, that's done in quite contained and controlled conditions. I mean, whether that also means that that's also the official crisp eating area of the ISS, I don't know. I mean, I would like the idea of there being a crisp module on the ISS. That would be fantastic. I'm just retreating into the crisp module to consume some walkers. See you later. That's not a
that's what you tell them anyway. Yeah.
I was going to say
that
I was going to say
module.
Yeah, I was going to say there's more manufacturers out there than walkers, but actually, Golden Wonder went to the wall, didn't they?
No, except that I was in Morrison's, which is a grave mistake. That's an aside. And whether it was new old stock, I don't know. But there were Golden Wonder crisps.
No, they were for a while in my local Tesco, and then they disappeared, and they've never come back.
But we've had
loads and loads of crisp manufacturers, though.
Golden Wonder went to the wall because they were the most insanely generous company in going. I mean, I sent them a letter complaining about a green crisp.
Yes,
you expecting like a complimentary bag. They sent me 24 packs in return. It's like, yeah,
that was that not in podcast episode 24? That story.
I believe it. Yeah, as I say, I've dined out on that story for years. Literally,
you dined out
eating the crisps.
Right, so where did we get to then?
Well, I think we were trying to establish how you define a crisp.
The Mignon Morceau. If the Mignon Morceau is a crisp, that's my choice. If it's not, then it has to be a big ridged McCoy, and then it would be interesting whether trying to frisbee it or just luzzing it would be more effective.
Steve?
I'm looking up mignon morceaux because I've never actually eaten them.
They were very 80s crisp.
Yeah.
Well, you can still buy them, I take it.
Yes, I think so.
Philly's Fog are still around, yeah.
That looks like it would certainly, you could get some distance with a mignon morceau if it's classed as a crisp. I think it looks more like it's more like a little garlic bread, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but it nonetheless is crunchy.
See, my definition of a crisp
is it a potato?
Is a potato chip. Yeah.
Is it a potato?
See, I don't think that's not a potato. That's more like a mini garlic bread. In the same way that really you could say a twiglet isn't a crisp, it's a snack, but it's not a crisp because a crisp, I think, it has to be thinly sliced potato.
Yeah, I think you're right
fried.
there, Steve.
Right, that's the definition of a crisp.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think we've put that one to bed.
McCoy, in that case, has to be a McCoy. It's the only one with sufficient mass.
I'm going to go with a heavy ridged crisp. Whether that's
would the ridge not though ruin its aerodynamics in terms of?
No, I think that its lack of mass is going to scupper it before aerodynamics takes hold.
Because yeah. What about pretzel pieces? Are they crisps? Were they classed as a?
No, because it's not potato.
If you're discounting one bread product,
potato.
Definitely saying sliced potato is the only way to go.
Yep.
Apparently, which also rules out all tortillas.
So the answer is. Oh, nice picture of. Yeah, no. A picture of Joanna Lumley.
Joanna Lumley
From the Avengers days.
But still,
I'm not quite sure why that's come up on my search for Phileas Fogg.
Actually, I've just seen it as well. I've clicked on it. More snack news, but for some reason,
yes. Oh dear God! Exclamation mark.
I mean, I have to say, I've never gone to the business of choosing my potato snack on its ability to be thrown.
No, I mean, if you were going to have a food fight, you wouldn't use crisps. Anyway, you know, there's better.
Well, you'd want something which you could smear in dip and then would
mashed potato.
Stick satisfactorily to its target.
Yeah, mashed potato.
Yeah, I suppose. Although I would regard that as a nuclear option. You're leaving yourself open to having it thrown back at you, and that's just not good.
Okay, so I think we've established that if having defined what a crisp actually is, then what did you say, Ed?
I'm going for a McCoy.
McCoy, yeah, a good call. If, however, and they don't specify, the chips, crisps, are still in their container, clearly it's a Pringles packet, yes.
Yep.
Unless someone knows of any crisps that come in a tin, I think they've pretty much got that down.
Okay, well, it looks like we've solved a few, needy world issues there.
Actually, to be honest, there's very little fat on this one.
Yeah, Ed was surprisingly on message when we asked him some serious questions.
Yeah, I was a bit worried about that.
Well, I'm sober, I'm sleep deprived, and I haven't eaten recently. So whether that's the secret to actually getting me to focus on anything, I don't know. But it's possible.
Well, I think on that bombshell, that is enough for this week. My thanks to Ed Selley.
I'm like a bad penny. I always turn up.
And Steve Withers.
This is a new experience for me.
Don't forget, you can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Bookmark AVForums.com for the latest reviews, news and video. And you can also leave us a rating on iTunes. I'm Phil Hinton. Thank you very much for listening. And we'll see you again next Wednesday.